Welcome to another classical music podcast. My guest today is Mr. Andrew Kwon, the director of Andrew Kwon Artist Management. Mr. Kwon is a pianist by training and a manager by decades of experience and success. He is on the faculties of the Glenn Gould School, on the boards of multiple organizations, and I thought a absolutely vital insight, represents a vital insight into the industry part of the music industry. So with that, please welcome Mr. Andrew Kwon.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Pleasure being here.
Thank you for joining us. It is, I keep on saying it so often that it has become, I think, a little cliche, but it still bears repetition. This could never have happened in the pre-corona world. I can't imagine people having the time to sit down and just, talk, on a busy Friday afternoon.
And specifically one that south of the border. I'm based here in Toronto, Canada. Happy Thanksgiving to all the Americans watching today. And though these are challenging times for everyone in whatever path and career you're in, we still have lots to be thankful for. So again, thank you for the invitation. And indeed, for those of you, Emil works with a colleague of mine, and because of the access to technology, and I remember when people used to say, oh, it'd be so strange to have a phone call that have video on it, and here we are, as if it's an old friendly rotary phone.
I'm now that you mention it, I'm having a slight flashback to seeing 2001 for the first time, and this was probably in the 80s or something that I saw it for the first time, and I thought how weird it was. There's a scene where a character places a video call from the moon to his daughter back on Earth from a payphone. And the part that I thought was weird was the video phone. I mean, that was the novel part. He's talking, to his daughter.
Right.
I never thought that I would be laughing at the payphone part of that.
As in, find me a payphone today.
Right? Outside of a museum.
Right,
so,
right.
But like you said, the connection was through my manager, who suggested that I asked you to join a seminar that we were giving here at Kirov, which was a real pleasure and a huge opportunity for the students. But of course, those questions that we were chatting over, privately with a couple of students in the seminar, bear re-examining in a larger context of the people watching this podcast. I don't know if I told you the sort of viewership that we are to whom we are speaking. Did we go over this at all?
No.
Okay, so there's a lot of kids who are considering a life in music. There's a lot of parents who are considering letting their kids consider a life in music. And these podcasts, both from the ballet department, the music department, are a way for those people that might not be in the industry in question to gain an insight into the industry in question. So I definitely wanted to talk to you today about, the industry side. What does it mean to be an agent? What misperceptions might people have from seeing or hearing the word agent in a different context? I want to talk to you about the world, pre-corona and where the corona world might point. And at a slightly more specific level, to also discuss the various pros and cons of different types of agencies. But to begin with, if you were talking to a parent of a wonderful young musician who is wondering whether music is the way to go, and one of the things they're considering is, so who's going to see to it that my kid, upon graduation, can make a living? How would you explain the job of an agent to a non-professional?
Our role is essential in the ecology of the industry, the performing arts industry. It's always challenging for any specific person to negotiate on their behalf. We always hear uh, the shoemaker's kids have no shoes. Um, a copywriter's biography is the worst of their own. That holds true for musicians and for hockey players and golf players. The ability to put a tangible monetary amount for their goods and discuss that with a buyer is always a little bit tricky. You can do it for anyone else, but when you have to do it for yourself, and therefore the industry has this very essential role of an artist agent slash manager. To begin with, we need to sort of define quickly the term agent and manager. Those of you who are
And
watching,
maybe even impresario as well.
absolutely okay. Um, so the role of agent manager, those who have bought and sold a house, you work with an agent. An agent is not someone who tells you how to design your living room when you purchase it. They don't, they just find you the type, you want a 3 bedroom, you want a 4 bedroom, you want 3 bathrooms, you want a fixed basement or a finished basement, etc. The criteria are there. The agent looks for it, gets it for you, negotiates on your behalf, signs, you're done. An agent in our business is similar to that. We get you the performance opportunity, and a lot of the rest of the duties and responsibilities are up to either yourself, the artist, or a manager. A manager is much more involved in the artistic development, the marketing profile, the branding, for lack of a better term, the career path, the territories of consideration. But specific to our genre of music, there has to be a vast understanding and knowledge base for the repertoire. If I know nothing of voice types, I would not know if I should put a coloratura soprano into which operas. If I don't know if it's a Helden tenor that should sing a role and I put a lyric tenor in, I would be a laughing stock. Therefore, the role of an agent is much more broad in its responsibility in the classical music genre. When you and I spoke, you're a violinist. My background training was as a pianist, but we can talk string quartets, we can talk violin concertos. That's the type of knowledge base a manager, an agent manager in our industry holds. So
I should point out that in the various searches that I've had at various times in my career for an agent, I have noticed, this is not for you, this is for the viewers. I have noticed that some agencies have nothing but singers,
correct.
and some agencies you can't find a singer at all, and this is why the ones that have the singers are specialized in knowing when the audition processes for the singers are. What singer's voice is not quite ready to tackle Wagnerian opera. What singer needs to be kept to the more elegant, lighter repertoire and so on. But there's equally, we should point out, and you can speak to this much more than I, Andrew, on the side of the buyer, the concert series, the administrator in the symphony orchestra that is looking for a given soloist. There is often also an insufficient background. The administrator may be very good at running their organization, but can't necessarily make the decision as to whether a particular player would make a good soloist for their orchestra, would make a good pick for a recital series and so forth. So what I, as a player, what I need somebody like Andrew to do is to not only negotiate the fee, but in talking to the various buyers, to be the trusted source who says, oh, you're looking for a 3-bedroom house. The one that you're about to put a bid on, actually the 3rd bedroom isn't a bedroom. So you are the educator for the buyer as much as the advocate for the seller.
Correct. And I'm fortunate that this is my 29th year of working in this industry. And I've been very fortunate that there are some artists who have been with me for the 29 years. My roster has not changed, not because of choice, but simply because of the respect and trust and understanding. I often say that I might not have a contract with an artist, but I have the keys to their house. The relationship is that tightly woven that if an artist proposes a program that's, I say, oh, you're going to concert series X, and the artist says, here's our program proposal, they would trust me if I said, you cannot play that work, come back and give me something else, because they know I have their best interest at heart, and they trust the symbiotic relationship. And that's in the perfect world, that is the role of an agent manager in classical music.
I can jump in and also anecdotally from my own life in terms of the relationship between a performer and an agent. My very first manager was a friend who was very gung-ho about my prospects and so forth. And back in my immediate post-student days when I lived in Columbia, Maryland, one fine night, I lived on the ground floor of an apartment complex. One fine night, there was a shooting in front of my house, or in front of my apartment, I should say. And all I knew about it was I was sitting on the couch in my living room, and suddenly the window was broken. And what later I realized had happened was that 2 bullets had passed in front of me, gone through the wall, the right-hand wall of my living room. One of them ended up in my bed. One of them ended up in my shower. But aside from the initial moment of somebody just threw a rock through my window, how dare they, and subsequently the terror of, oh my God, those are gunshots, the very first call that I placed was to my manager, to my agent. I said, I'm gonna hunker down somewhere. I don't know if there's more shooting. Can you come and get my violin? I wasn't even thinking straight, come and get me, but come and get my violin because the window is open and anybody can just barge into my house. It was a reflex. It's the person that you call. I wasn't calling my mother. I wasn't calling the cops. I was trusting her to have a straight head on her shoulders at that moment.
And that's the type of ideal relationship that is also the intangible feel of success as an agent manager. Sadly, he passed away, but I was best man for one of my former clients. It was his second marriage, but and it all can. I always remembered that I used to represent a very fine string quartet, the St. Lawrence String Quartet, and at that time they were finishing off their residency at Juilliard, and it was before they were appointed in Stanford. But we always laughed because one of the mothers would always call me. One of the members' mother would always call me, and I still have a wonderful relationship with her to this day. And she'd always say, I need to get in touch with my son. It's like, oh, okay, hold on 1 second, and I just punch in my second line and connect the two. And so, or it's like, oh, your mom's trying to reach you. So definitely those are almost the romantic days of our industry. As with all industries, it gets more complicated. Technology plays a factor, finances plays a factor, the industry's challenges plays a factor. 40, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, the music that you teach, the music that all your students are studying, the Western European art form was sort of the only game in town, with all due respect. Yes, that's being extremely insensitive to indigenous music that was here before us, but that's a whole different conversation. But the touring networks that we are familiar with, the concert stages that we are familiar with, have always been primarily designed for the sake of the Western European music. Here we are in 2020. I remember, like you talking about watching 2001, I remember in the 70s and in elementary school reading that one day we will be a paperless society. How many of us, hit print just to proofread on paper and then toss that paper out? And how many of us used to have one laser printer? Now we have three because we have three stations at home. Things change, and the industry has evolved, and the role of an artist manager has to evolve as well.
I think the thing that people imagine is that, well, I can print out my own flyers and I can print out my own, brochures or promotional materials. And in any case, who the heck reads, promotional materials? People go to a website. But we should also point out that the design of the website, the look of the website, would need the input of someone like you, and the steering of traffic, the sort of traffic that is looking for a new soloist to book for the upcoming season. Again, that traffic is steered by someone like you.
Absolutely. The role of the manager is the voice piece of the artist, the promotional piece of the artist, and you get to a point where a company like mine has garnered hopefully a level of respect and expectation of artistic excellence that I work with. But there are literally thousands of pianists and violinists and oboists and clarinetists out there. And it's my job as an artist manager to maintain both my company name and my artists' names in the forefront of the decision makers across Canada, across the United States. Obviously, an office like mine cannot tackle the world, so I do primarily focus in the country that I live in, which is Canada. But recently, in the past 4 or 5 years, I've re-expanded back into the U.S. markets. So yeah, that's
actually a good,
of an artist.
Segue also from the perspective of, let's say, a soon-to-be graduate of a conservatory or a soon-to-be even graduate of a high school. When they are looking at what agency they might want to try to be signed by, the idea that a small agency which can give you personalized attention and have that kind of relationship where you call them when there's a shooting, or when your mother needs to get in touch with you, that small agency has those pros. They know your favorite bottle of wine. They know your sort of tendency to maybe be late, as I often am, and might tell you that the flight is a half hour early, just to make sure.
Right.
But there is a trade-off, isn't there, for the larger agency that can have a roster of 100 or more artists, or a larger agency that has a network around the globe and not just primarily in one geographical area.
Correct. And I guess the challenge in today's world, those who follow our industry, and you and I spoke in the past couple of weeks about the news, the largest, the pillar, the pinnacle of agencies, often accredited to being the father of artist management, Columbia Artists. And those who are watching, you probably heard of ABC, NBC, CBS. The C in CBS is not Canadian Broadcast Service, it's Columbia Broadcast Services. And that Columbia, through many evolutions, acquisitions, mergers, breakoffs, became a classical music artist management agency called Columbia Artist Management Agency. And this year they celebrated their 90th year as a company. And in COVID, actually around a month and a half ago, they announced that after 90 years, they will close their doors, and they did, which meant that type of company, which had hundreds of artists on their roster, now hundreds of artists have now lost management, lost representation. So it's definitely a very difficult time. It's a challenging. It's a new time, as with anything that has disrupted the flow of things. New things come out. Riverbank stones become smoother and rounder, but the flow has changed, and of course, the uncertainty of our industry, of our future. Yes, we read Moderna and Pfizer is coming out soon. The world is waiting for it.
But it's coming out into a world, where people think that vaccines are, cause autism, and where people will not take vaccines because Bill Gates is trying to spy on them, and so on.
Well,
the wrinkles presented once the vaccine comes on the market mean that by no means should you start dusting off your tuxedo just yet.
Correct. And it's very interesting. It's I was on a similar type of a panel conversation a couple years ago, and the role of the artist manager has also changed. We have had to become specialist in international work visa situations. We had to become knowledgeable of taxation practices. There was a time when your colleagues north of the border, north of Buffalo, us Canadians performing in the US, would be a very easy application that within 1 month we'd get a work visa stamped in our passport and we'd come over. Today, that has become much more challenging, much more costly, as with everything in life. The complications, every new advancement of technology, of process, causes a different type of complication, and that's okay. It's how the world spins. But in answer to sort of your first question, and this is one of the wonderful things that I hope post-COVID we will face to face get to enjoy food and talk. Which you asked, what can I tell some of the parents who are watching? What is the reality of the term performing artists in 2020, 2022, 2025, whatever future timeline one is looking at? And I would have to say the term is a portfolio career. The teachers, the students, the parents watching have a lot of respect for Professor Janowski. Emil has a career of performance, has a career of academic teacher, has a career of a masterclass host, has a career of competition juror, and other industry activities, and that is the honest reality. Oh, sorry, of course, your festival, and I simply say, if you look at many people around the classical musicians around the world, and I'm not, sure, it would be wonderful if everyone becomes the next Lang Lang, or the next Yuja Wang, or the next Joshua Bell, but it's at least with a hockey team, there are many hockey teams, or a baseball team, or superstar tennis, or golf. Even golf, there's only 150 PGA cards in the world. How many golfers are there in the world? So yes, of course it's challenging. No pyramid success industry is not challenging. But having said that period, I'm sure I see my banner there. So the pyramid success, yes, we all hear of that 0.1% superstar, but the base is huge. And I guess as I always talk to emerging young artists, what is your definition of success? What is your understanding of a career in music? And
I remember having literally that conversation with a colleague. I won't mention names, but at a competition where both of us went to compete and both of us failed to make the semifinals. This was early in my competition career. We had this conversation, walking despondently back to the hotel. He said, this was my last one. I'm like, this is like your first or your second one. What are you talking about last one? He's like, look, what I want is the picket fence, is the wife, is the 2.4 kids, is the steady paycheck. And I'm not going to get it this way. And that description sounded very, very appealing to him. It sounded, the wife and the 2.4 kids. Yes, I get that. The steady paycheck, I kind of get that. But there's a flip side that I thought, well, no, that's not my definition of success. And similarly, the very first competition that I won, I remember having this conversation with myself in the dressing room. The concert, the prize winning concert was broadcast on live TV. I was about to go out and play the Beethoven Concerto on live TV in Italy. And I was sitting in the dressing room and having basically a mild nervous breakdown. And the question popped into my head, so this is what you want for the rest of your life, to do this 150 nights a year, to have this kind of freak out? The sane voice in my head responded, it won't be the same kind of freak out. If you're doing it 150 nights a year, it won't be. But, as the parent has to look at the child and say, is my child's definition of success, is my child's definition of happiness, the excitement of what may tomorrow bring, or the certainty of tomorrow will bring X number of rehearsals, Y number of dollars, and Z number of, plans for further rehearsals. Everybody's different. And I doubt that anyone is a completely one type or another. Somebody who just wants their paycheck and to do nothing more, I've not really met anybody like that either.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong in that situation. It was very interesting. I was talking to a festival director, and we're talking about how COVID now has shut down most symphony orchestras across the world. And I said, what a wonderful opportunity for these organizations which have a brand name in their community, in their city, in their region, to re-experience the beauty of chamber repertoire, for these musicians, these orchestral musicians who for the past 15 years, 20 years have played in an organism of 70, 80, 90 people. It's your listening capability has altered, especially if you're cellos in front of the brass. I'm sorry, depending on which way you set up
the orchestra is arranged.
And it's like my lord, I can't imagine that going to work every day and having the Boston Symphony brass blaring behind me every day. Yes, there's obviously workplace health issues, but here we're in COVID, and I was saying to a festival director about the orchestra in their city. Wouldn't it be great if these musicians got to play, the Mendelssohn Octet or the Schubert Trout or the, just this repertoire? It'd be so amazing.
Do you find that many orchestras are doing that? I mean, the New York Philharmonic seems to be.
Well, simply because you can't put 80 people on a stage with social distancing. And then the festival director had a very interesting point. But these people join the orchestra because they love the orchestra, love the organism, that they are, the sum of the parts is not greater than the whole. They love the fact that they are one intricate voice to making this 80-piece organism work. And I never really thought about that because I work with ensembles. And I love the intimacy of a string quartet, or the intimacy of a piano trio or a piano quintet, or whatever it might be. Why would anyone want to play in such a big organism where you lose your identity? But to each their own, as they say, right? And for parents looking at their children, for students thinking about a career path, I go back to that term, a portfolio career, where this, all of the parts will make you a better and a whole musician, the new musician, the musician of the 21st century. You can't.
Once upon a time, that wasn't that went without
Needed.
saying. Once upon a time, I'm now looking at the 19th century, the 18th century. The idea of a separation between composer and performer. The composer was the performer. The performer was a composer. Right?
Correct.
The portfolio career was the standard.
Right. And then definitely the composer was the publisher.
Yes,
and
exactly.
and the impresario, because then they went forth and found musicians to play their piece. If they did not, like someone like Van Hall played with Mozart and wrote his own music and published his own pieces, and probably hired his buddies to be the string quartet.
Or I'm thinking of the Paganini model, where the musician takes upon him or herself, but in those days himself, the financial responsibility of, you come to a town, you make sure you're there's buzz about you, you rent out a hall, you sell the tickets, and you collect the gate. Paganini managed to do that awfully well. I mean, the first superstar,
touring artist,
right, for the general public.
And we think about, for parents who are listening, whose children are taking piano, not from you, obviously, but but I see the two piano in your studio behind you, and you find a lot of symphonic works arranged for four hands, one piano. And historically, before the days of being able to pre-record a trailer, how did symphonies market a new work? Well, publishers often either got the composer or someone else close to the composer to do a transcription of their symphonic work onto four-hand, one piano, because in the 18th century and the 19th century, the piano salon, the piano was the focal entertainment source for many families. So, two pianists, brother, sister, mother's daughter, would sit down and learn these symphonic works, and that would
then go to the concert hall,
and
hear the work played, by a full symphony orchestra that they already knew intimately in their literal own 10 fingers.
Exactly. And so, those are definitely the simpler days when they didn't have a choice of learning a symphonic transcription or watching Netflix. So as a result, as I said, the industry, the world evolves, the music hasn't. What I always end up going to, and I saw someone post something that, they're feeling a little bit down with COVID, like they've been an artist. How can they get, they want to quit? Any advice? Inspiration of the human soul. The arts, this year we celebrate Beethoven's 250 years ago, before the days of Target shopping malls and box stores and Amazon delivery. Someone in Linz, this human being that walked with two legs, 10 fingers, wrote music, that here we are in Maryland, in Toronto, around the world, still celebrate and cherish. And this past weekend, I listened to the Razumovsky string quartets performed live. And then we actually did a piano, a string transcription of Beethoven Emperor. Very interesting for piano.
So for string quintet? How do you do that?
Vincenzo string quintet, so a double bass. Vincenzo Lachner, Lachner. He actually did it for all five, and sure, we missed the timbre of the winds, of the woodwinds. We missed the beautiful, thunderous roll of the timpani. but all in all, the viola and the second violin and the cello really worked. And I guess here I am wearing the manager's hat, because this is the world, this is the language that I need to know. And to think, as I was sitting there, every note, every marking, every phrasing that Beethoven put into the score 250 years ago is as relevant today. And that is the art. And that is also the passion and the catalyst and the inspiration to do what it is that you do and you teach. The ability to take these notes on a printed piece of paper, and to bring them to life through your experience, your interpretation, through your technical capability, and add your interpretation to share. I believe it was Ernst von Dachniani who said, through the brain, through the heart, through the fingers, to the audience. And that's exactly.
The fingers are not necessarily the same ones that held the pen.
Right.
So the parallel I make for parents, for my students, is the playwright and the actor. Because yes, you can read the play, and if you've had a certain amount of musical training, I know people who can open a score and they hear the playback in their mind as they are looking at a piece that they've never seen before, right? They literally read the score like most people read a book. And you could do the same thing with a play, but still the actor is needed to transmit that to the general audience. And there is the irreplaceable thrill of the experienced in real time, the live performance. Just now when you were talking about the different sort of, COVID model, and I was thinking, one reason I see a post-pandemic world is that part and parcel of the experience of being a performer is feeling that room full of 2,000 people. And mind you, not a room built for 2,000 and feeling 200 people, feeling a full room, their energy level, their level of involvement and excitement with me as the performer is part of the experience of that piece for me. So to play for my own pleasure, that whole sentence has always, to me as a violinist, that sentence meant nothing. My own pleasure is a multifaceted one, derived from the beauty of the music, hopefully the quality of my performance, or the pleasure in anticipating the morning drink that is going to help me forget a bad performance. And at the same time, the audience experiencing this with me, they manipulating me manipulating them. There is either a world where we come back to that, or the arts are changed in a more fundamental way than any technological advancement thus far.
And I think what is important, and hopefully in what I share in conversation, one can see my passion for this repertoire, for this music that was written. And I use classical music very generically of music.
No, we should point out, you're including Baroque and Romantic.
Exactly, of course. I'm not just talking about Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, all the way to contemporary music. One of my string quartets just played a piece by Florence Price. I knew nothing of her. She is the first African-American woman who broke the barriers. Her Symphony No. 1 was performed in 1930 during a very tumultuous time in American history.
An American African-American composer,
female,
in the 30s.
Female. And her string quartet is stunning. Wow. And again, if my conversation doesn't reflect my passion and love of this, my first word to those who, you need to have that. You need to, against all odds, want to feel what you just described, that energy, that communal energy, that for lack of a better word, that spiritual enlightenment, and be able to interpret that piece of music written. Was it Isaac Stern when someone went backstage who said, "Oh, Mr. Stern, is that the Stradivarius? It sounded so good," and he handed him the instrument and said, "Here, you play it." Of course, there has to be the hours and days and weeks and years of dedication, of practice, and of exploration of repertoire and exploration of art. Uh, we cannot be unilateral in learning. My role, if this is my knowledge base of the repertoire of my artists, I can easily go through legal clause conversation at this same level. I can talk about the orchestral programming of most of the Canada's larger major orchestras and what type of thematic programming they're going through. The role of an emerging artist, I think this day and age, um, I have no scientific or research-based statistic, but I've always felt that if you were a young superstar hockey player at the college level, and there's lots of them, college football, NCAA, we look at the Michigan State Wolverines, not sorry, my apologies, University of Michigan Wolverines. The stadium seats 105,000 people. Football is very important, and I'm sure that most of those football scholarships, football players, various teams, they have a general idea of, okay, if you get picked first round, what that means. If you get picked second round, what are their chances of making it to the NFL? How many football teams are there in the NCAA, and how many football teams are there at a professional level? The same thing holds true. How many music schools are there? How many music schools have orchestras, and how many professional orchestras are there?
We should point out that the numbers stack up differently over time in one very important sense, and that is that, let's say we're just talking about a position in a symphony orchestra. A football player has a career spanning, what would you say, 10, 15 years?
7 to 8 in the NFL.
7 to 8. And then you have to reinvent yourself. You're doing something else, presumably, within the football industry, but maybe something else entirely. Somebody gets a seat in an orchestra, they could be there for 30, 40, 50 years.
Correct.
And yet every single year, the conservatories churn out a new batch of graduates, all of them looking for jobs.
Correct.
And the bad news is, of course, that the competition is ferocious. I sometimes tell my students that, if you are, let's say, a baseball player and you get a hit 1 out of every 2 times at bat, your batting average is better than like Ty Cobb. If you are NBA and you get 9 out of 10 free throws, you're an all-star. Your price is beyond price. If you are a violinist and you get 99 out of 100 notes, the local community orchestra might have you if they feel well disposed towards you, and that's about it. The competition is ferocious.
Absolutely.
The seats remain static, but this is the negative side. The positive side for the people like you that I point out, because it's easy for us on the inside of the industry to start feeling despondent. I point out that it says something about the interest, the stickiness of classical music, that so many people choose to go into music, choose to give their lives over to music when they are going to conservatories, knowing about the ferocious competition when they come out, and knowing about the more niche level of attention that classical music gets compared to, let's say, professional football. But that should say something about both the need for music and its prospects.
Absolutely. And again, I go back to the term arts and the importance of arts and culture. We, those who are fortunate enough to travel to different countries, to different cities, I always say you go to Vienna and you don't come home talking about their banking system or how great their curbs are designed or their sidewalks. You talk about the buildings, you talk about the music, you talk about the architecture, you talk about the churches. And these are all human creation.
Artistic creation.
Music is equally important, and often the artistic creation, absolutely, and we often do forget, as you say, what it's like. Yes, to perform for a live audience, to perform in a hall of 2,000, not just socially distanced with 150 people in there, but we often also negate the fact of the experience for a audience member, not just because of the beauty of what I'm hearing from the stage, but that I'm sitting beside a total stranger, and in communion with that audience member, we all felt that excitement, and that's something that's very powerful. And so I'm not even sure if I answered the first question. As an emerging young artist graduating, I think one has to define their need of what success is. If as a NCAA star quarterback, Tom Brady is 40 something, and he just got traded, right? And so he's still playing. The spot has not opened up yet. What other options do you have? Sorry?
He's the outlier in terms of both longevity and
but what
that pyramid,
for that star college graduates, what's the secondary option? What are the other leagues? There's the NFL, the end all and be all. There is the National Symphony, of course, end all and be all. There's the Baltimore Symphony. There's the Chicago, the AA symphonies, as we call them, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, LA, the superstar orchestras. But then what's the next level? And what's the next level? And what's the next level? How do you maintain your internal refueling of opportunities? And sometimes it's through those all performances that end up developing who you are. Sure, it would be great if you come straight from college and land that one job, that 1 in a million. But the probability of that happening is not that easy. Has it happened? Absolutely. And in life, we always hear that, that one NBA kid who comes out and screams with $200,000.
Somebody won the lottery, I'm sure, last week somewhere, But
Exactly.
If your retirement plan is predicated on scratch-off tickets, I would suggest you get a different financial advisor.
That's right. Or you better start buying tickets.
A whole mess of them.
Exactly. So it's important to understand a little bit more about the industry. We definitely hear of the Joshua Bells and of the Long Longs and the Yuja Wangs and the superstars. We all hear about that. But as I often say, let me just try to convert this into U.S. Demographics. As a cellist, how many superstar cellists can one name? And you probably, everyone's sort of
I can name 5.
Exactly.
I can name 5.
And I could probably stretch and name 9. And then after that. So in other words, there are more jobs available as governors of American states than there are of superstar cellists.
It's a really great point to make.
Silly analysis, So
yeah, but you have to think in terms of when we're talking about the positive, you have to think in terms of this is a global profession. It was once. I'm sure in one way or another will be again. How many orchestras are there in Germany? How many orchestras are there of the regional level in the United States? That do have seasons of more than 1 or 2 concerts a season. How many recital series? How many summer festivals? It is a huge ecosystem, which sometimes people get the picture of. All artists are starving artists. It's a huge ecosystem. What are the numbers? Do you happen to know for the performing arts, the musical performing arts, in terms of either percentage of GDP or just generated revenue?
It's a little bit tricky because sometimes the metrics of things like Broadway musicals, not just New York's Broadway musicals, but Broadway musicals around the United States. We hear numbers like 2.1 billion that COVID has hit thus far. It's
2.1 billion of just New York musicals.
no, the term performing arts. So it's hard
Okay.
to define what it is. All I know is that Live Nation, which is a huge impresario for pop and rock, is holding something like $800 million in unrefunded tickets right now because some major rock tours have been postponed. So, it's a huge industry. And like many of your children, at one point in my time, I too, as a pianist and similar to violinists, we can happily, easily practice 4, 5, 6 hours a day. Uh, as a brass player, you physically cannot do that. As a singer, you physically cannot do that. I did pay my dues as a pianist and practice. Try to learn as many Beethoven sonatas as I could, learn as many uh, pieces as I could, and fast forward, here I am as an artist manager, and there are huge, vast other avenues that still are equally important in the industry of performing arts. We often see just the performer or just the conductor or just the orchestra, but there's this huge infrastructure behind.
Ecosystem is really a good word to describe it, because
Absolutely.
you see the one lion, the one sort of super predator that is so attention grabbing, but there is a large number of layers that allow that apex predator to even exist.
Correct.
Or the soloist or the symphony orchestra or the recital series, the stage hands, the halls, the publicity people, the people just involved in the day-to-day, like buying tickets. Somebody needs to actually handle the sales of tickets. The recording industry, leaving aside the management industry that deals with the economics of all that, there are a lot of places for people with different skill sets within the musical industry. I would say that to any kid who's thinking about going into the arts. I would say that to any parent. You're not only going into this one instrument. You're going to how that instrument collaborates with others, and in general, how people collaborate with people.
Correct.
I also
And
I want to make the point to from the political perspective, the notion that the arts are the recipient of some sort of charity, that we're walking around as an industry with palms stretched out. The arts generate a whole lot of revenue, don't they?
huge. It's the feasibility studies of any performing arts center that's opening in any centers. Actually, it was at Detroit that, because of the revitalization of the arts corridor, that whole area of town has just been rejuvenated, because people come in for the show, therefore they need parking lots attendants, they need restaurants, they have stores, they all of these
They
activities.
might make an afternoon of it, right?
Exactly.
Their $30 ticket to the symphony, and no, it's not $300. People think, I can't afford. If you can afford tickets to the movies, you can afford tickets to the symphony. But that one ticket may be an afternoon or evening out.
Absolutely. The economic multiplier of the performing arts is huge in our industry and in societies.
As you were saying, when you go to Vienna and you come back, not talking about how beautiful their sidewalks are, but talking about their buildings and their museums and their concerts. For people to think of the arts as somehow, if we've got any attention left over, we will address them, is short-term and long-term strategic, misunderstanding. There is revenue to be raised. There are, a huge number of jobs to be generated, and all of that for something that is more than just, the basics of existence. All of that for something that is the memorable part of existence.
And my advice and insight would obviously be, as someone entering the industry, to realize that, and this isn't just classical music. This is, as I use the example, Target stores. Target stores probably started off as a grocery store at one time, and here we are in 2020, and you can buy everything from wrapping paper to pharmaceutical needs to I haven't been to Target's US, but I'm sure you can do some quick banking. You can do
the pharmacy, the bank, the florist, the
clothes, the toys,
yeah,
and you buy your bread and butter.
Yeah.
In today's society, to be a one revenue stream, unless you make the world's best
or only
or
the world's only, right?
Only, exactly. You have to multi-revenue stream, and similar to your own career, you are a performer, you are a professor, you are a festival artistic director, you're an adjudicator, you are a masterclass. And then to give someone an idea, who we don't often see it this way, but a masterclass workshop host, you're like a master troubleshooter. Like, you are thrown in to work with students, and you have never had experience with these students, and you, within that 15 minutes, have to find that tangled little knot and untangle it immediately, and hopefully open a new.
To be fair, the success rate with that is difficult, because, like you just said, I meet a new student. I have 20 minutes from the time that they begin playing to the time that I have to say thank you very much next. And in those 20 minutes, I have to try and do something transformative.
Right. But it's still an avenue of your activities. It's one of the many avenues of your activities. And so for parents to realize that as college graduates, chances are they will have to be extremely well versed in the multiplex of administrative duties. The arts are sensitive. A regular MBA just doesn't get it. We are not producing widgets and gizmos. That's my economics background. There has to be sensitivity to the intangible metrics, which is very hard to say. Why did that Schubert, the fact that the Schubert, was played, did it really mean 15 kids in 10 years will not be on the streets? That is too far of a calculation, and therefore we need to figure out the language and the scales to define what it is that we're doing. And there is a whole industry of us, whether it's managers, whether it's artistic administrators, executive directors, development officers, the same way that we are all fighting the same sponsorship pool. The orchestra, the concert series, the festival, the university, we're all vying for the people who have the money, and we have to define and in words say why it's important to play another Beethoven string quartet. Why is it important that these four musicians need a stage and an audience? And therefore we seek your philanthropic generosity, which, fast forward to here we are, end of November, during one of a historical pinnacle time in humankind's history. In 30, 40, 50 years, they're going to say the way we said the Spanish flu, they're going to say the Corona era, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 period in history. How might that affect us? We cannot dismiss the need for the term live performing arts, for sure. It is vital. It is what we do. Uh, all of these makeshift opportunities now, uh, I think our friendship, our relationship will definitely strengthen when and if we have the chance to sit down at a dinner table and continue to converse. Musicians need the live stage to perform, and anything shy of that is a musical Tylenol. It's a makeshift. It just puts the
Band-aid.
headache. It's a band-aid situation. But in answer to the need of performance, many concert halls have now redesigned, equipped themselves with the technological capability of recording a concert in a much better means and a higher quality. I know that as we started COVID, even my own little office here, I upgraded my camera because I've been doing a lot more of these. Um, Halls are improving their camera quality, their sound quality, in order to prepare for more broadband dissemination of concerts. I think one of the silver lining is that we think about all of those who are stuck at home, our aging audience. There was a beautiful, beautiful clip on Facebook, and I'm sure you caught it, of prima ballerina of Spain,
Yes.
who has Alzheimer's, and she's in her late 80s. And someone put a headset of Swan Lake, or not Swan Lake, I think, and she instinctively moved her hands in the gesture of the choreography that she knew so well in her heart. And here's a woman who, for the past 8-10 years, has been in a state of total dementia. And to think that these halls now will have that capability to reach a portion. Yes, we can bring back the live audience, but we can also extend this beautiful product, this amazing experience in a best case scenario. Of course, we all would love to have the freshest piece of produce, but shy of that, I would still happily take canned vegetables if it meant no vegetables or canned vegetables. And if people are housebound, if people have economic obstacles to attend, if people have mobility issues to attend, um, I think post COVID, this is one of the beautiful opportunities that the world will have.
To
That
combine these to combine
exactly,
these two experiences. Yeah.
exactly, and
And
hopefully,
I think from the industry side, it has been, at least in some of the people with whom I've spoken, it has been eye-opening to realize that there is an audience out there that we never knew was out there. An
correct.
audience that, when live performance shut down, that audience promptly tuned in, to live streams and video. Um, they were there the whole time, and they were
Yep.
consuming the product in, whatever form, um, we had overlooked, radio broadcasts maybe. But now
Correct.
that they know about us and we know about them, maybe we can also keep the conversation going with them.
Absolutely, absolutely, which is so important. And to say that, oh, let's dismiss it completely because I'm a live performing artist, and a stage is the only medium and platform in which I can extend my art, is very narrow-minded. It's marginally the same as us forgetting how Paganini started. I think because on one side, the in the industry, roles like mine have sort of cushioned and bubbled the artist's responsibility to a certain level. But here we are in COVID, where no one is performing. It's a level playing field again. So we all need to rethink. We all need to be creative in our, we all have to start changing how it is that we're doing our business. The models have evolved.
Well,
Uh,
Darwin did say that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, but the ones most resistant to change or most adaptive to change.
Adapted to change, right?
Yeah.
So
We are, at some sort of inflection point that's been said before, but, I am sometimes accused of being pessimistic, and I think, no, I'm not. I look at a situation like this and I'm seeing, not that we've got to come out of this, face first and planted into the mud. We've got to come out of this stronger than we were going in.
or we have to learn. We have to learn about what it is that we failed to provide when we had that opportunity.
Yes.
That we, and it's very interesting. You and I were just quickly talking about this. Classical musicians are so trained to play, wholeheartedly for their identity and their interpretation of that piece of music. And sometimes we forget that there's that audience out there. And here we are, not physically feeling that audience in the room and having to play for the camera. Pop and rock artists always perform for the camera. Classical musicians often perform for themselves. Here we are in COVID, level playing field. We have to come out, adapting to new changes, adapting to new norms. What is it like to perform without being able to move your body that way, because you have to be focused on the camera? You've done teaching. As you said in my introduction, I lecture both at the University of Toronto and the Glen Gould School. And normally in my lecture style, I'm standing. I'm sort of half seated on the table, where I'm leaning against it, and I move around in my teaching. And here we are in Zoom land, and I don't move. So there's new adaptations that we all have to be familiar with and
But
learn.
I think the art form need not be simplified, Baudelarized, gutted in any way. I think the art form has survived, like you said, 250 years since Beethoven. Almost, what is it, 300, 1685. I'm bad with math.
Right.
335 years since the birth of Bach.
Right.
When you see an art form that is that timeless, my only fear is that the post-Corona world will first start trying to manipulate the art form. Let's shorten symphonies. Let's play separate movements. I think that the one thing that has kept the art form alive is the art form, and the manner of presenting it has changed with the centuries. And this is one more change that the centuries will bring, but not to the music, just to the manner in bringing the music to the audience.
Right. I don't think the content needs to change. I think the packaging needs to change. I might be sitting on the other side of the fence regarding length of concerts. There's very little things that we do in that style. I have no issue myself listening to a 2-hour concert. I know others do. And, as I've always said, if someone, because of health issues, had to have a 180-degree changeover from being a vegetarian to reintroducing meats into their diet, you cannot on the first meal give them an 18-ounce medium rare steak. Right. It is the slow introduction. We in marketing of classical music have done everything possible to try to make it hip, try to make it happening, try to make it convenient, try to make it cool, try to make it sleek. At the end of the day, it's still an 18-ounce sirloin that's sitting there. Why is it that we can't just do a shortened concert? You and I understand listening to a Brahms symphony because your parents, your family, you grew up in it, I grew up in it. But there are a lot of average Joe, for lack of a better term, who have the monetary income. Look at Wall Street. Look at any bank branch manager, they're
But
all
look at the 40, 50,000 people at a ball game, of whom, you know, a
are
significant
paying
portion have
right.
just shelled out $300 for that afternoon.
Exactly. You know, and so why is it that we are still adamant about maintaining a 2-hour program? Why are we adamant in not incorporating a electronic visual enhancement to that experience? We watch movies, all of us watch movies. None of us are willing to pay the $12 to the movie theater for a black and white mono stereo sound system rickety chair experience theater. We want THX, we want RDX, we want surround sound, we want Dolby Plus, we want cup holders in our chairs. But here we are in symphony orchestra, here we are in the world of classical music, and we're still keeping people to 45 minutes. Do not talk, do not clap, do not move, do not sneeze, do not.
But the flip side of the equation is that some places are saying, you know, it's Beethoven and we need to add a rock beat. You know, it's Bach and we need to have, you know, semi-nude dancers on stage. It's an opera and we need to make a huge political statement and you know, do something with the scenery that's going to get newspapers talking and tongues wagging.
Mhm.
That where I see the issue is when in order to try and sell a product, you dilute the product.
Right. We dumb down the product, we bastardize the product,
So then the only issue is what constitutes you know, diluting it versus presenting that 18-ounce steak in a manageable portion size.
absolutely. And that's where I believe we need to think a little bit more creatively. Why is it that's, you know, I jokingly say, if you look at movie theaters, movies start at 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock, before dinner or after dinner, or we start concerts during dinner.
Yeah, we were just talking about this with Irina Morsanu last week, where she said that, you know, if she had her way, the 8 o'clock concert would go the way of the dodo. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. 6 o'clock drink, 6:30 concert starts.
In a day and age where we know demographically, socioeconomic, you know, profiling of our audiences, you're talking about people who tend to be in management, upper management, who attend our shows, and we know that people who are of those job responsibilities do not finish their work at 4:30 or 5.
Right.
And in a city like Maryland, in Baltimore, in a city like Toronto,
you're not going to get anywhere in 15 minutes.
You're not going home to come back downtown.
Yeah.
So I'm done at 5:30 and you're going to make me drag it out to 8 o'clock. So what am I supposed to do? Give
early
it to my
dinner.
So I'm with you. Why not break the rush hour? Have that 5 o'clock.
Have a happy hour upon entry to the hall.
Yeah.
You know,
6 o'clock show, 7 o'clock done, 7:15 done. You know, if we take out the overture and do concerto and symphony, you're only losing 17 minutes. So,
yeah, and you may not need to. My point also being that, you know, an earlier start with something that encourages socializing before the concert, not just during intermission, with an early enough start that people do not, like you said, drag themselves home only to drag themselves back downtown, which they will not do, and not to have to, you know, make them always struggle with, yeah, but tomorrow I've got an early meeting, and by the time this concert's done and dinner's done, I'm home at midnight.
Right.
You know. Yeah.
So we need to rethink the packaging. You know, we are mind my terminology, but we are a self-centered society this day and age. You know, we want to be able to access anything, hence Amazon is so, you know, has just absolutely exploded success, because we want to be able to shop at 1:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. We want it and we want it at the best price, and we want. Classical music needs to be a little bit more sensitive to that. And, you know, if we're losing audience by staying proud of an 8 o'clock start, what are we achieving? I remember talking to, I gave a similar talk in 2004, I believe, 2004, 2005 in Brussels, and a woman from and said, manager of the symphony there, or the Philharmonic Oslo Phil, and she said, we did exactly that. We moved our Saturday night concerts to 7:30, and we took out one of the works and made it shorter. She said 3 board members resigned in frustration. So I know it's
but I've also got horror stories about, you know, the Metropolitan Opera having a strategy meeting and one of their largest donors saying, so when can I see a, I don't remember if she wanted a Bohème or a Traviata, but in the, you know, standard, the classical staging, not updated, not hipsterized, not, you know, and she was essentially told, you know, to shut up and sign the checks. And, you know, what speaks in her is the audience. I would like to see Traviata without anyone wearing, you know, biker jackets and you know, without a rock beat added, metaphorically speaking. If I am your sponsor, it's a no-brainer. You're going to hopefully do what I'm telling you. But if I'm not your sponsor, if I'm just a member of the audience, you may want to listen to what I have to say too. The members of the audience that respond well to various new initiatives do not demand Baudelarization. They do not demand, you know, shortening the concert necessarily, but they may say, listen, take my schedule into account, start the concert earlier, or take my tastes into account and program more contemporary music or less contemporary music. You know, the old story of when Pierre Boulez tried to push so much contemporary music that the New York Philharmonic was facing a financial crisis, whenever that was, back in the, was it 70s, the 60s?
60s,
yeah. As an arts administrator, well, this brings the whole conversation sort of full circle. As the agent, or as the manager for a performer or an organization, we need to notice where we have been overlooking the needs of our audiences, because the audience is there. Going back to my point of conservatories never needing to wonder where their recruitment's going to come from. The audiences are there. The audiences want what we have to offer. And it is your job to help bring those two sides together.
And it's a wonderful opportunity. I know pre-COVID and I am very have no right to understanding that you have triplets and another family member, 4, and yeah, I only have 2, but pre young family and pre-COVID, I was probably doing 60 concerts a year, attending 60 concerts a year, and I would say out of those 60, unless it was a seat that was handed to me that I had to sit in, I would normally sit at the back of the hall, because I want to see the reaction of the audiences. To me, that's sort of my research, that's sort of my understanding, and know what works, and I like to listen at intermission to people, you know, eavesdrop on people to see what they like, what they dislike, and yes, it's the role of an artist manager. If it happens, hopefully it was rescheduled already from 2000 to 2001. Now it's 2002. And they came back and they changed the concerto on me with one of my artists, and they wanted to do a tandem concerto. And the first question I said was, what's on the rest of the program? Because I don't want to be on a full contemporary on behalf of my artist, because I know it's important, it's valid. If people didn't support Mozart, historically, when Mozart lived in Vienna in his final days, there were 73 other known composers. We know of Salierius because of the movie, but who are the other 72? If no one supported Mozart, perhaps his music would have been lost even today, chance or not. But we have to support living artists, living composers. That's being the case. I know as an agent, a manager, that those type of contemporary programs get smaller audiences, my goal for my artists is to develop their profile. So when they said, is your artist willing to do this Tendun concerto, Tendun, uh, first, I wanted to, it wasn't just, know, a,
Andrew, I don't know if
a cello part that was just hidden inside the symphony that was into as well, and then we found out the rest of the program was going to be anchored. The negotiation of fee. Anyhow, it's always that case. Sure.
Andrew, I don't know if you can hear me. The connection. Now we've lost picture with Andrew, so it's possible that he was not visible to everybody else. Assuming that there we are.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was saying that I'm not sure how much of that the story you were just telling was audible to people, because sometimes when I can't hear it, the control room still can. But in any case, I wanted to sort of, if there are any viewers who have questions, I wanted to make sure that we have some time for questions, because we could keep talking all afternoon and evening.
Yes.
Let me see if in the chat I don't see anything. And as of now, I don't see Andrew, and I don't see questions. Now I see Andrew. Good. But before wrapping up, I did mean to ask you one question if other people didn't. I was hoping that we would get a Q&A. Just a very prosaic point about management specifically, less about the industry in general. What would you say is the normal process of being introduced to a manager or agent and deciding that this agency isn't for you or that one is? What words of advice to the rising young player?
I think the challenge is that the industry post-COVID will probably shrink yet again. I think I know, being on a number of committees here in Canada, a lot of agents are questioning their stability, their survival capability. Most agencies work on a commission base, and so with no performances, there's no revenue. That's just the plain cold facts. My philosophy in business has always been multi-streaming, and as a result, I'm fortunate. I'm one of the more fortunate ones. I do have other revenue for my company, but I would say for young artists, the one thing the most that I happily can think of is that we're a very giving industry. There are a lot of opportunities for mentorship and interns. Learn about the industry, talk to your professors, talk to symphony administrators, talk to concert recital hall administrators. Ask them if you can intern, ask them if you can offer 4 months of your time just to understand. Most of us walk into Targets and buy a loaf of bread. We don't know how that loaf of bread gets onto that shelf. We don't know how the food terminals work, where buyers go at 4 a.m. in the morning to pick their produce for their store. We don't understand that aspect of it, nor do we need to unless you are in there. But you're a performer, you want to be in the industry, you need to learn about the industry. It's one thing to be a musician, it's another thing to understand the business of music. So as a young artist, that pinnacle of success, it will likely first be finding a manager. There are not a lot of managers. You talked, that's Professor, you mentioned a friend of yours. If you have a friend who loves and believes in you, absolutely, see if that works. Otherwise, start by looking up who managerial companies are in your neighborhood, in the area of where you want to perform. There was a time when, unless you had a 212 area code, you weren't important. Today, you've got outstanding managers and agents scattered in some of the smallest addresses in towns, because here we are talking to the world. I'm in Toronto, you're in Baltimore, so you're in Washington. So, the world from that point of view has changed. Learn about who is out there, and don't expect that, Leonard Rose, and those who are cellists may not even know that name. Leonard Rose taught Yo-Yo Ma, and Leonard Rose did a lot of introductions for Yo-Yo Ma back in those days, but those days don't quite exist anymore. So for a company like myself, which will be the majority of companies once you go out there, because the big three companies, one just got bought.
I want to make sure people heard that. Like I said, you froze, so I want to make sure people heard that. One of the big three got bought by San Francisco Conservatory.
One of the big three closed down its operation after 90 years, and the other big three got bought out by a Russian consortium. So chances are, if you're working with management, it's going to be a boutique agency. And most of those who work for those big agencies have come to realize that the overhead is just too astronomical to maintain a staff of, a payroll of 25 people, or, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you get to that level, all of the other administrative expenses, healthcare and office insurance and all that stuff. Pensions. Yeah, exactly. And so learn about these companies, learn about all of the companies, the same way that a young superstar high school quarterback knows when the college scouts are coming. They know which colleges are interested in them.
But it is different for college sports in that, there are scouts. You're not going to be scouted as a young violinist coming out of even Juilliard, much less, coming out of a less famous conservatory. You're not going to be scouted.
So it's your job to find out the other way, who the management companies are, and how do you figure you getting in touch with them. Most of the time, sure, everything's available on the internet. You can find my company, you can find my colleague's company, you can find all the agents in North America. But if you just cold call, send them an email, or pick up the phone and call them, you probably won't get anywhere. Most of us need to scout at a certain level. But as I said, pre-COVID, pre-young family, I already went to 60 shows a year. I don't have a lot more energy to keep up on all the emerging young artists performing in Toronto. So if you want me to attend your concert, one, keep me on top of your activities. There are ways to do that. There's obviously a very clear line between harassment and just being in touch. Send me an email.
Keep and maintain a mailing list.
Right.
An email list. Yeah.
Send out a little by a quarterly newsletter. If you happen to play within a 1 hour radius of Toronto, send me an invitation. Will I go? If the stars align, I might. Chances are, you know,
Even if you don't, the point is that you are aware of that
exactly.
person's existence, and the next time you hear their name, the
I'm
chances
I'm
are,
aware again.
yeah.
And then if I start, and then agents like myself, we have a huge network of friends and colleagues and contacts. On my roster alone, I have two heads of piano departments. I have two deans on my roster, one director, School of Music. My wife used to run the highest level of national amateur uh, music competition here in Canada. I hear names, I know names, and so if I start seeing activities coming, then it perks my interest.
Yeah.
And that's important. There has to be, you can be the world's best chef, but if you don't tell anyone about it, no one's going to come. And that holds true with being a musician. It's singer songwriters, the indie folk, indie rock, indie hip hop, R&B. They they're out there. They're using social media. They're using postcards. They're using e-blast.
Well,
When you
in
go
the
down
pre-COVID days, they were, by definition, their own managers, their own,
right,
social media manipulators, and so on. A lesson, yet another lesson that they should be teaching us is that your job is not just to sit in a practice room. Your job is also to get out there and circulate. So
that's right.
yet again, bringing this sort of full circle to where we started. What is an agent? Well, for those of you who are watching this conversation and wondering if music's for you, what is an agent? You're an agent right now.
You're a small business.
And maybe you might need to farm some of that out because you don't know everybody and not everybody trusts your opinion. But initially, to get to the person whom everybody does know and whose opinion everybody does trust, you are your own mouthpiece.
Correct.
I don't see any Q&A, and I've taken up an hour and a half of your time, so I feel incredibly guilty.
Nope.
I would like to thank you yet again for making the time, because this is invaluable, especially for the people who don't even know what they don't know. They're so far removed from the industry that they don't know what questions to ask. But I'm hoping that this is a good place for them
Insight
to start
and
asking some questions.
Right. Absolutely. And I realize that this is another general statement, but most in North America, a full-time job is 40 hours a week. I highly doubt there's any student out there who's practicing 8 hours a day, which is okay. You practice your 4. There's some artists who can achieve what normal average people do in 4 hours and 2 hours. That's all fine. What are you doing? If you're practicing 4 hours a day, what are you doing for the other 4? Pay the due diligence to the administrative duties of one's career. Take the time to research. Just start by looking up orchestras. Start by looking up concert halls. Start by trying to understand. And if you see a concert brochure, bring it to someone who's in the business.
Look at the sponsors.
Look at the sponsors. Look at the administrative structure, the staff. If you see a concert hall, bring it to your teacher and say, so most of these shows are comedy shows and family shows. Why don't they present classical? Understand the infrastructure of our business. In doing so, the more you are familiar with the business, the better the business will be for you. So there is a huge aspect. It is the arts. I do hope that there are opportunities for emerging young artists to be on rosters. Sometimes, like with anything else, it does come with a cost, and perhaps not the forum to discuss it, but if you are hoping to sell your house for $500,000 because you're buying $600,000 house after that, well, you got to remember that that agent's going to take a percentage of that, and you're not going to get a clean check for $500,000 towards your next house.
Yeah.
Likewise with our industry, an agent takes a percentage, and that may mean the difference between you taking a comfortable flight or not a comfortable flight, or you staying in a cheaper hotel or not a cheaper hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all very, my advice to young artists is don't be the wallflower. Ask the question. First of all, you have an institution of teachers that you study with. Professor Chinovsky has wonderful insights. He has been a performer and artist, comes from a family of artists. He knows the industry extremely well. And if he doesn't know the answer, he probably knows someone who has that job that can answer that question. I forget who it was at the time who asked me about something about recordings, and I said, "Oh, let me just ask my friend." And my friend felt bad about it. It's like, "So who you asking?" I said, "Oh, the head of Canada
Major
has a
label.
public." Yeah, exactly. And I said, "Oh, I just had dinner with him last week, so he's going to answer." So it's amazing. In our industry, the saying is 6 degrees of separation.
No, it's 2.
It's 2 in our business. If I probably know someone who knows someone, and there's the connection. And if it's not, then you probably aren't doing your job in the business. So for emerging young artists, ask the question, we realize how difficult the industry is. Those of us who have been in this business for a period of time know the challenges. We don't want you to face those challenges. Most of us are very happy to help, very happy to share our experience and knowledge. So think about the questions, think about what you don't understand, and just reach out. And if you called me up and asked for my opinion on something and it wasn't even looking for management, I'd probably think to myself, wow, this artist actually has this whole in-depth side of understanding the business or needing to understand the business. That weighs more than your ability to play, oh, you only know 17 of the 300 Vivaldi concertos. Oh, geez. No, I care less about that. If you ask me, so why can't I do this with the orchestra? And you were trying to, change things, or you're honestly caring about the betterment and the improvement of our industry. I think that is very valuable. So
and a relief for the agent to have someone
who, instead of just
personally
sitting at home,
invested.
right? And definitely the days of sitting at home waiting for the agent to say, "Oh, I've got you a
Oh,
tour."
those days were over when I was starting. I wish somebody had told me then what I'm telling people now.
Right.
Again, Andrew,
Pleasure.
thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. The next podcast will be on Friday, the 4th of December at 3:00. The guest will be announced as of Monday. It's a bit of a surprise. So please tune in for today. If you have any further questions, when you see this podcast, perhaps after the live broadcast, if you have any questions, do feel free to post them. And the Kirov Academy will do its utmost to see that Mr. Kwon receives those questions, and if he has the time, answers them. Andrew, thank you so much.
Stay well, stay healthy. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
And to you.
Thank you.